The Carolina Panthers made 6 selections during the 2022 NFL Draft. How did that class pan out? Well, I'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council or at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And Final Four going on this weekend in San Antonio. Also, the women's Final Four going on. I don't remember where it's at. I think it's down in Tampa Bay, but go ahead, go to FanDuel and place your bets on who's going to win the national championship. And you can go ahead and place your bets on who the Carolina Panthers are going to select in the draft upcoming here at the end of the month, as we are finally here, day 1 of April, 23 days away from the beginning of the 2025 NFL Draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But we're not going to focus on this year's draft on today's show. We're going to go 3 years in the past and look back at the 2022 NFL draft class for the Panthers. Why look back at the 2022 class? Because they played 3 seasons. And I know every year we see following the draft, there are all these draft grades that are placed out there for each team's class. And while that's just content, trying to fill this wasteland of really nothing actually happening in May. But yet, folks like me and writers have to find a way to come up with something for the rabid fans out there like you. And we so appreciate everything that y'all do by listening and watching and reading all of our content. But man, it gets pretty tough out there in the offseason at points in times. And that's what draft grades really are. That's why they exist, to fill a hole during that void of really nothing actually happening with these teams in the NFL. But they're mainly pointless as, okay, you have no idea whether that player was an A or that player was a B or a C grade until they actually play on the field. And one season is not enough. It would not be fair for me to sit here into grade, even though I know I did, looking at the draft class thus far for what Dan Morgan did, but it wouldn't be fair to give like a final grade, a final determination of what the draft class Carolina had last April did in their rookie seasons. We got to look at the rookie year, the second year, the third year, heading into the last year, potentially, of their rookie deal, or to the point where Carolina has to make a decision of whether they're going to exercise fifth-year option on said player. So today, let's take a look at the 2022 draft class and go back and grade that class and look at it in totality and how it fared and whether Carolina got it right, got it wrong, or just right there in the middle when looking back at it in 2022. So going back to that draft class, Carolina had 6 picks during that year. Pick number 1 there in the first round, they had the 6th overall pick, taking Ikem Ekwonu, the tackle out of North Carolina State. Of course, a Charlotte native, having played at Providence Day School. In the 3rd round, they traded to get Matt Corral, 94th overall, the quarterback out of Ole Miss. The hope was that potentially Matt Corral could come in and be the franchise quarterback. We were in that situation in Carolina where they were trying to trade for Baker Mayfield on night 2 of the NFL draft, but they could not come to terms with Cleveland as the guaranteed money and who was going to take what. That was not figured out. So the Panthers decided, okay, fine, forget it, Browns. You guys already have Deshaun. You clearly don't want Baker. We're going to move on for now. We're going to take a young quarterback in Matt Corral. Now, right after that, Scott Fitter, the then general manager here in Carolina, talked about Matt, was coming in to not really compete, but to be someone that they could develop through the course of the season in the coming years to maybe be that guy. But a lot of you back then believed he's the franchise. Well, We know how that worked out. We'll talk more about that later on. In the 4th round at pick 120, it took Brandon Smith, the linebacker, out of Penn State. In the 6th round at 189, it took Amarie Barno, the edge rusher, out of Virginia Tech. And in the 6th round at 199, it took Cade Mays, the offensive guard from Tennessee. And in the 7th round at 242, they took Kalen Barnes, the defensive back from Baylor. So looking at those 6, very clearly, there were 3 that were successful in a way as they're still on the roster. And then there were 3 that were not successful as they were either never on the roster or not on the roster right now or are playing in the UFL or not playing football at this present time. But looking first at the successful draft picks, the positives that came out of the 2022 NFL draft for the Carolina Panthers, Ikem Ekwonu, 6th overall from NC State. Awesome story for a hometown kid to go to state, to play at an all-American level, to be outstanding, and then to be the pick that Carolina made as they needed an offensive tackle. And you looked at it like the year prior in 2021 when they took J.C. Horn 8th overall and had the entirety of the defensive board at their disposal. Same case in 2022. When they looked at it, it was Ikem Ekwonu and every single offensive player out there. And it was a poor quarterback draft because if it was a strong one, certainly it would not have taken until pick 6 for a quarterback to go off the board. Now, kind of similar this year, but a little bit different as is expected that Cam or Chador Sanders will be off the board by pick 8 when Carolina's up, or really before then as the top 10 goes down here in 2025 up in Green Bay in the coming weeks. But Icky, I think, has been overall a positive, certainly for the Panthers. You look at 2022 as a rookie, his PFF grades weren't that great, but when you watch the season, you really love what you saw from Icky as he had a 65.3 PFF grade, 67.5 pass blocking grade, and a 64 run blocking grade, allowed 6 sacks and 27 pressures and 552 pass blocking snaps, which was excellent for a rookie to step into the league and do that. And it wasn't just like the 6 sacks. If you looked at the season, beginning week 1, going up against Jadeveon Clowney, his now teammate, and against Myles Garrett, he really struggled. Week 2 against the Giants on the road, also struggled in that game as Carolina started off 0-2. But after that, I believe he went like 10 straight weeks without giving up a sack through that season until at the end gave him a pretty big sack that led to a fumble with Sam Darnold in that de facto NFC title game in week 17 on the road against Tampa. But overall, Icky was a constant at left tackle. And that had been a big problem in Carolina since the decade, really almost a decade since Jordan Gross had retired, as it had been a revolving door and turnstile, literally and figuratively, after turnstile there at that left tackle spot. And he came in and he held it down. And looking at the PFF grades, he actually graded out below average in every category. But that was a year where PFF be damn, man. Watched the games, saw the sack totals not be super high, saw a guy play and start in every single game at left tackle, and I was good right then and there of Ikem Ekwonu. Now in 2023, unfortunately, you did not necessarily see the progression that you were hoping to see from Icky, as he did have a better PFF grade, 67.4. His pass block grade dipped down to a 62.3. Run blocking grade, which was a big piece of why Carolina liked him, and a lot of people saw him more actually as a guard, Mel Kiper Jr. in particular, and that has been a discussion point about Icky since he was drafted by Carolina, especially following the 2023 season, or really in the midst of the 2023 season. Had a 77.0 run blocking grade, which was 13 points higher than he did as a rookie. Now, he allowed 11 sacks and 44 pressures and 730 pass blocking snaps. That was bad, just terrible for him in his second year in Carolina. Nearly double amount of sacks, 17 more pressures, and the pass blocking snaps went from 552 as a rookie to 730. So far more opportunities, as Carolina's offense was inept, anemic, horrid, whatever adjective you want to describe it as in 2023. Did not help out Icky, did not help out everybody on that offense, as he really struggled. And he had 7 different left guards next to him throughout the season. He actually graded out above average overall and in run blocking, and right at average in pass blocking. So while the numbers as far as pressures and sacks did not look great, the numbers PFF-wise, they did improve. Now, last year in 2024, I think actually has been his best season as a Panther. Had a 71.7 PFF grade. Pass blocking grade was up to a 66.2, a best in his career. Run blocking grade up from a 77 to an 80.5. He allowed 7 sacks and 39 pressures and 593 pass blocking snaps. So you look at 2023, 730 pass blocking snaps last year, 593. Now, he did miss 2 games due to an ankle injury in the middle of the season, so that's going to go into that number as far as having a lesser pass blocking snaps he played last season. Overall, the sack total went down. The pressure number was similar, but still went down. And the overall grades, they all went up. He graded above average in every single category, although only slightly above average in pass blocking. And that's kind of what Icky is. He's not really a great pass blocker. He's not necessarily the guy that you look at and think that, okay, that is that just stud at left tackle. He has been above average. He's not necessarily been serviceable. He's been above average. And because of that, he's now eligible for the 5th-year option this upcoming year that will pay him in 2026, $18.4 million based off of the playtime benchmark. And that's a decision that Dan Morgan, that Brant Tillis, that Dave Canales and his organization have to make this offseason of whether they want to do that with Icky. And I think that whether it's the 5th-year option or a team-friendly extension, Ikem Ekwonu needs to be a factor here in the future on this offensive line for the Panthers, with some question marks after the season at center, whether it's going to be Corbett long-term, which probably not that long-term, but Mays or Christensen. And then at right tackle, what are you going to do there with Taylor Moton following this season as he's playing on that massive cap hit? And in the next offseason will be an unrestricted free agent. If anything, Ikem Ekwonu has been reliable, played and started in 49 out of a possible 51 games in his career here in Carolina, missed 2 games this past year with an ankle injury. And if you look at the guys that were starting there as the primary left tackle in the seasons prior, this is why Ikem Ekwonu to me has been a really solid pick for Carolina. 9 starts from Cam Irving in 2021, and he was not good. 7 starts from Russell Okung, the rent to tackle in 2020, and he also was not great for them. 9 starts from Dennis Daly as a rookie in 2019. 13 starts from Chris Clark in 2018. 16 starts from Matt Corral in 2017. 16 from Mike Rimmers, who single-handedly lost the Super Bowl back in 2015 for Carolina, but he started in 16 games in 2016. 16 starts from Michael Orr, the blind side in 2015, and 15 starts from Byron Bell in 2014. That's not even counting guys like Marshall Newhouse, who had to play left tackle. Christensen had to play left tackle at points in times. Just a litany, Greg Little, of just terrible football there at left tackle. And you look at it, the 3 seasons, really you can count Chris Clark as basically having a full season almost, but the 3 seasons prior to Ikem Ekwonu coming to Carolina, you could not get one guy to play even half the season at that left tackle spot. It has finally been solidified by one singular player at left tackle, the first time since the 2011, 12, and 13 seasons that the same guy started 3 years in a row at left tackle, that being Jordan Gross. Carolina nearly took him a decade to do it, but they finally found the replacement of Jordan Gross. And I look at it, I give Icky a B+. He's not the greatest left tackle. There have been better prospects that have come out since he has entered the league that have been better than him, but he has been stable. He has improved, even if in 2023 it looked like he had declined, and certainly plenty of numbers prove that was the case. But overall, man, Ikem Ekwonu has done what Carolina needed him to do. That was be a consistent, reliable force there at left tackle and to upgrade that spot, and he has done that. So it's a B+ to me as far as Ikem Ekwonu, looking at that 2022 draft class. Now, 2 other guys remain on the roster, Cade Mays and Amare Barno. Take a look at what they've done and what their grade should be through their 3 seasons here in Carolina in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back here on Locked On Panthers, taking a look at the Carolina Panthers 2022 draft class 3 years later. Better time to now go back and give them grades. I know after every single draft, you're going to see draft grades placed out there for the players, and even maybe a year after, like I did when looking back at Dan Morgan's first year as Panthers GM. Go back and watch and listen to all those shows out there, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and over on YouTube. I do have a playlist for all of those shows breaking down Dan's first year as Panthers GM. You can see people like me going out there and making those grades, but they're pretty useless until these guys really get a couple of years under their belt and heading into that final year of their rookie deal where they potentially get extended in an offseason, or you wait and see what's going to happen after their final year. So Ikem Ekwonu, someone who will have potentially his fifth-year option exercise. That'll be about $18.4 million 2026, or Carolina will decide to go ahead and get ahead of it and give him a maybe more team-friendly, as far as they want to extend him now, deal to be their starting left tackle for the years to come. Either way, Ikem Ekwonu should start again in 2025, 2026, and probably beyond here in his hometown of Charlotte, our hometown of Charlotte. Cade Mays, he was also taken by Carolina back in 2022, 199th overall out of the University of Tennessee. He has played in 38 games across his 3 seasons in Carolina, starting 15 games. Now, this is a different career arc than Icky, of course, as far as where Cade has gone from and where he is now here in Carolina. He was waived last year after being a part of the Arby's package back in 2022 as a rookie, to having to fill in at left guard and at right guard during that injury plague season for the offensive line in 2023. Last year, did not make the roster at a training camp and signed to the Giants practice squad. Then in the middle of October, Carolina needing to find some depth there at center as Austin Corbett was out for the rest of the season after getting injured in Chicago. They decided to bring back a familiar name, and that was Cade Mays. And he came back and he wound up starting the final 8 games of the season at center. Even when Ikem Ekwonu had missed some time and he was back in the lineup at left tackle, they decided that it made more sense to keep Cade at center instead of putting Brady Christensen, who had taken over at center when Austin Corbett went down. They decided, nope, Cade, that's the guy we want there. Brady, we love your versatility. We want you to be our 6th guy, and we're going to let Cade be that dude. And Cade ended up being the best center for Carolina as far as PFF goes. At a 66.1 PFF grade, pass blocking grade is 74.9, really solid. That was an area where he struggled his first 2 seasons when he got opportunities here. And in run blocking grade, 66.9. It's never been the best, but that right there is clearly the best grade he's ever had. And then last Wednesday, he signed a $3.4 million restricted free agent tender with Carolina, and a team can still match that. And then Carolina will have to decide. I guess no one's sending it out there. But yeah, he signed it. He'll be a Panther this year. He's going to compete for the job with Brady Christensen, I would think, and with Austin Corbett, probably primarily of Austin Corbett. Brady Christensen coming back, that is one that has surprised me, and I'm wondering what role they want him to play and if he is going to get a chance to compete for the starting job at center. But Cade Mays, for a 6th-round pick, who, yeah, you cut him, but you brought him back, and you trusted him to be your starting center, and now you're bringing him back again to compete for the job and maybe win it. And I think probably like best thing for Carolina would be for Mays to again play well, and let's see if we can get that PFF grade up into the 70s. And at 25 years old, to be that starting center and to sign into a long-term deal after this year, and to have him and Bryce there as that starting battery, if everything works out for, of course, with Bryce and with Cade, that could be the pairing for years to come at center and at quarterback. And I think we all at this point in time who understand football know just how important it is to have that continuity. I'm not saying that these guys are going to be that, but you cannot think of Peyton Manning without thinking of Jeff Saturday, and probably more so, you can't think of Jeff Saturday without thinking of Peyton Manning and the relationship that they had there. Center, obviously an important position, and why Carolina really wanted to attack it last offseason as they put Austin Corbett there, a vet with a young quarterback in Bryce Young. But now 2 young guys in Cade and Bryce Young potentially are going to be paired together here in Carolina at that center quarterback exchange for the years to come. But I got to give it an A-. It should be like an A+. But because they cut him, I'm just going to dock the Carolina Panthers a little bit here. But still, man, they nailed this one. You got a 6th-rounder, and he's now a starter for you, or potentially a starter, a guy who you know can start games. We'll see how it plays out. So it's like, if it's an A-, probably more maybe a B, but I'm going to give it an A- because the 6th-rounder getting a chance to start again. Amare Barno, also taken in the 6th round. Actually, he was taken 10 selections above Cade Mays at 189. He's played in 29 games through his 3 seasons in Carolina. He didn't miss significant time last year, only playing in 5 games after recovering from a torn ACL suffered in that Week 16 loss against the Packers back in 2023. Has 3 career sacks so far, but he's primarily been a special teams player with 58% of the snaps played and 59% of the snaps played, respectively, in 2023 and in 2024. Coming into the season, I don't really know. Like, every time I talk about edge rusher, I always forget Amare Barno's on the roster. Like, I looked at it, oh, that's right. Amare Barno is still on the team. I've constantly only mentioned Jadeveon Clowney and mentioned DJ Wonnum, Pat Jones, second who they brought in, and even DJ Johnson reluctantly, and completely have forgotten about the presence of Amare Barno, but he's been kind of forgettable. And that's just the case when you get injured and you've been mainly a special teams guy and you have only totaled 3 sacks so far throughout your career. So right now, I mean, that's a 6th rounder who's still on the roster. I don't know. I guess if he comes back, probably more special teams role again for his final year. I don't see a Jero Vero wanting him to be a part of that. I'm sure he would want him to, but I don't think he's planning for him to be a part of that outside linebacker rotation. So I'll give him a C- because he's still on the roster. He was a 6th round pick, and it's just below average as far as what he's given them, and maybe even below that. But I'll be nice here and give him a C- as far as that selection for the Panthers a couple of years ago. What about the guys who are no longer here? In particular, Matt Corral, the future, the savior, who obviously did not pan out. The false idol. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few $100 this year, as there haven't been that many in March, but there were some, and they're gone. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Tournament games happening almost every day. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Let's take a look at the rest of the 2022 NFL draft class for your Carolina Panthers. In the 3rd round, Carolina decided, let's go ahead, make a trade, get up there to 94th overall, and take Matt Corral, the quarterback, out of Ole Miss, University of Mississippi. And this is a point in time where the Panthers had gone after Deshaun Watson disgustingly. And did you see Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, finally came out and said, yeah, we swung and we missed on Deshaun. And fortunately for Carolina, for David Tepper, he was like, I ain't giving that man all that money guaranteed. No, not going to do that. One of the best decisions that Tepper has made is deciding that he was not going to give Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed contract, as that has not worked out. A guy who was, just a beloved player. I know if you are a Gamecock or, I don't know, hate Clemson, then yeah, maybe you weren't a big Deshaun Watson fan, but that dude seemed to be such a great guy. And I can only imagine, and look, I have empathy, not necessarily sympathy, but I can only imagine just how he feels nowadays after the injuries and the Achilles and like re-tearing and all of that's happened to him and all that he's done. And it's kind of like, karma, I suppose, but damn, Deshaun Watson was supposed to be that guy, but it did not work out in Cleveland, and Carolina, fortunately, did not decide to go with him, and they spent all offseason trying to replace Sam Darnold. Sam came in 2021, looked good first 3 weeks of the season, lost McCaffrey, had issues on the offensive line, and, well, you looked at the same Sam Darnold we had seen up in New York, and the thought, at least when they brought him in, when they traded for him, 2nd, 4th, and a 6th, should have been to give him 2 years. But instead, after 1 season, they were done. And I was someone who never loved the idea of Sam Darnold. I came out here, I think on my first episode of Locked On Panthers, and said, no, don't do that. That makes no sense. And I'm happy that Sam has gotten paid, that he had success in Minnesota. I'm still not a huge believer. I'm not a believer at all, really, in Sam Darnold, but he's a lot better now than he ever had been. And that's a good thing for him. But Carolina decided they want to move on. At least they're trying to move on. They went after Baker, did not work out there in that draft night, and they decided, let's go ahead, get a young quarterback, see if maybe he can compete, but at the very least, develop him. And Federer came out immediately, kind of said that he wasn't here to compete. He was not there to push Sam, that he was going to be a guy to develop, and that being Matt Corral. And going back to the conversation I've had with people, someone was out there, one of his early practice, and said that was one of the worst quarterback practices they've ever seen from a professional. And that was alarming to hear. Now, plenty of fans, and I get it, at that point in time, people were desperate for some quarterback to believe in, and there was folks believing that Matt Corral was going to be the guy. And like, that did not happen. I've been wrong about plenty of things. Lord knows I'll continue to be wrong about plenty of things. This one, I didn't get this one wrong. I never bought into Matt Corral being the dude in Carolina. And unfortunately for Matt, things have not worked out for him. He injured his foot in week 2 of the 2022 preseason against New England. That was a point in time where, like, PJ Walker, he was not going to make the roster. But once that happened, Carolina, they had to stick with PJ because then Sam Darnold in week 3, he injured his ankle, and it was Baker and PJ. Eventually, Baker gets injured. PJ gets an opportunity to come in there. And then when Sam's back healthy, they go back to Sam. Baker gets released, goes to LA, and wins a game after being like on the roster for 3 days there with the Rams. And Matt never gets a chance. You have to wonder, had Matt Corral been healthy in 2022, does he get that opportunity instead of PJ Walker? Or does he have to wait? And based off of how he looked in the preseason, even before the injury, and how he looked even in those practices leading up to it, hard to believe he would have got that opportunity, but there would have been a lot of pressure, much like there was pressure on Will Grier, who made that ill-fated start back in 2019 on the road in Indianapolis and was terrible. That probably could have happened again in Carolina, but it did not work out for Matt. He returned the next season after they had drafted Bryce Young. There was some cryptic stuff put out there on Instagram by Matt, who had to have understood that they weren't going to stick with him or believe he was going to be the guy. He ended up never playing a snap or in Carolina or in the NFL, period, after being cut from the roster ahead of the 2023 season. Last thing I checked was he played last year in the UFL. That's United Football League. For those interested in spring football, gross. Played for the Birmingham Stallions last season. In 4 games, had a 58.1 completion percentage, 494 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And he's back on the team this year on Sunday in their debut against the mighty DC Defenders. The team lost 18-11. He did not start in that game. Some quarterback who I literally have never heard of was starting over him. Adrian Martinez was the guy ahead of him a year ago. Adrian Martinez of Nebraska, then Kansas State. So, yeah, this is one that's going to be an F-. That was a bad quarterback class. I understood Carolina wanted to bring in a young quarterback to, at the very least, develop, and then maybe he could be the guy. But as we've seen, none of those guys are worth a damn. Kenny Pickett can't play. Malik Willis looked better this year, but he ain't that guy. Desmond Ridder. Sam Howell probably has had the best success of any of those guys. And Washington gave him a year, and now he's a backup there, I think, still in Seattle. So bad class, bad pick, bad player. Probably was not supposed to be it ever. And I liked him at Ole Miss. I really did. I didn't think that he was going to translate to the NFL, and apparently he's not even translating to the UFL. I really hope Matt's doing okay and, have success in the rest of his life outside of football, because clearly it does not look like it's going to work out for him. Brandon Smith was taken there in the 4th round. Brandon Smith was expected when he went to Penn State to be kind of that Micah Parsons replacement there at that linebacker spot, and had all the physical tools as a 5-star coming out of Henrico County there in Richmond, Virginia. But man, didn't really live up to that at Penn State. And when Carolina took him, that clearly was a guy that had the traits that you're hoping. With better coaching, maybe it can work out. But if you're a 4th rounder with better great traits, and that's the thought process, a little bit different than a 1st rounder, like a Shamar Stewart in this draft class. Not a ton of production at A&M, but you look at the body type and you know the need for edge rushers. They're still going to take him in the 1st round. No one was willing to make that risk and that bet on Brandon Smith. He spent 1 season in Carolina playing in 12 games, making 1 start, had 8 tackles in 2022 as a rookie, where he had a 28.3 PFF grade and 52 defensive snaps. He was waived prior to the 2023 season once Frank Reich and the staff came in, signed to the Eagles practice squad, and played in 2 games in 2023 at Philadelphia. He was on the practice squad in Philadelphia to start last season before being waived and going to the Jets, being waived, going to the Raiders, being waived, and now he has signed a future contract to Raiders this offseason, so he's going to try to make it there with Las Vegas and with Pete Carroll. I'm giving this one a D-. 4th rounder. He at least stuck around for a season and played a little bit, wasn't great, and he's still in the league, so not a great pick there for Carolina. The final pick they made was in the 7th round. They decided to go out there and do draft Kalen Barnes, pick 242 from Baylor University. He had played under Matt Rule and man, this is the quintessential Matt Rule pick since he had played for him. And Matt, there was one of those videos where Matt Rule was calling him, was like, hey, are you still fast? And he's like, yeah, coach, I am. So I guess because he's still fast, they took him and he didn't make the team. He ended up signing on the Dolphins practice squad and then later to the Vikings, where he played 2 games in 2022, was cut from Minnesota ahead of the 2023 season, signed to the Steelers practice squad, later to the Jets. Then in 2024 was on the Browns practice squad, then again to the Steelers before being released last August, and was last seen on the San Antonio Brahmas. Okay. I don't know who that is, but apparently they were part of the UFL as well and was released 12 days ago on March 20th. So right now appears that Kalen Barnes is out of football. I don't know. I gave him a D. 7th rounder. Don't really expect him to make the team anyways. And he hung around for a little bit, but now he's out of the league. Probably an F, but whatever. Kalen Barnes did not make it. So looking at this class overall, what grade does it deserve? 33% of the draft class is still here in Carolina. Actually, sorry, 50% because Amare Barno's here. So 50% of the draft class is still here in Carolina. Yeah. You got Icky, you got Amari, you got Cade. So that's 50%. Not a bad hit rate, if you're being honest there, but really 33% of these guys turned out to be valuable players, that being Ikem Ekwonu and Cade Mays. And sure, there's still a possibility for Amari, and I would hope that would be the case, but the value for him right now appears to be on special teams, which is not nothing. But 33% of the draft class, valuable players, 50% still here. That's compared to 36% that are still around from 2021, that being Chuba Hubbard, who is a franchise player now. J.C. Horn, certainly a franchise player. Tommy Trimble, Brady Christensen. So you look at those 4 compared to, I guess, the 3 that are still here. Icky, clearly. Guy worth keeping around. Cade Mays. We'll see how it works out. But they got more out of 2021, even if it was 11 picks that they got. But as far as just the hit rate, half of the class still here. Look at 2020. 14% is around, and that's really just one player, Derek Brown, and he is one hell of a player. Overall, though, they've identified 2 potential long-term starters on the offensive line, which is not insignificant. Like, that is a pretty big deal, especially looking at what the franchise has been here in recent years with the offensive line. Last year, obviously, was good. This year should be good as well, knock on wood. But to have 2 guys from one draft class, one as a 1st rounder, and then one as a 6th rounder coming into the year, one certainly going to be a starter. The other one could be a starter. Like, those could be your starters at left tackle and center, 2 very important positions moving forward. I mean, that's huge. So I give it a C- this class, because just the Corral one is a huge whiff by them. A guy who just is not an NFL player at all. Smith, same kind of deal. Barnes, whatever. And Barno, injuries, but also I don't know how much I'm buying to what he would have been had he been healthy last year for Carolina. So I'll give it a C-. And that just kind of goes to show you got to give it some time. So obviously I'll talk about all the picks that Carolina makes coming up here in 23 days time, and really beyond that, I guess 26 days once it's all over here in the NFL draft later on this month. I'll talk about all of that. Absolutely. But understand, we're going to have to wait until 2028 before really knowing whether those guys have worked out or not here for your Carolina Panthers. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter, at Julian Council, and Blue Sky, at Julian Council, because on Fridays, answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on the show, either at me or DM me on Twitter or at me on Blue Sky to get those questions over to me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll be back with you on Wednesday as Vashti Hurt of Carolina Blitz. You all know her. She is very active on social media, interacting with all of y'all, does a great job covering this team. Going to get an offseason vibe check with Vashti, talk a little bit about where the Panthers are and whether they're potentially contenders in the NFC South coming up this season, some of the additions, and we even get into a little bit of Jero Avero and why he's still here. So all that coming up on Locked On Panthers here on Wednesday.